Hello and welcome back to part 2 of my tutorials on how to cross stitch. I thought I would make another video purely just on full cross stitching so you can watch me stitch. With the first tutorial I went through all of the stamped kit information, so when you buy a stamped kit, everything that you get in the kit, so to speak, and I didn't actually show that much stitching. And the reason for that was because I didn't actually have a stand at that time, and it was a little bit awkward, a bit more awkward than I planned to stitch with what in hand, like in a hoop basically. So I went and bought a stand, which is this thing that you see here. I'll just zoom you out a bit so you can see it. I don't like stands, I'll be honest. The only reason why I've bought this is to show you guys how to stitch while I'm not holding the hoop, so it's more sturdy and it's not wobbly. But any other time when I'm just stitching for myself, I don't use these. I just find it really awkward to end and start threads because this stand, I have to turn my cross stitch over to start and end a thread. So you can do starts from the front, so you can make a knot from the front, but it is a little bit tricky, so I'm not going to show that today because this is just a bare basics tutorial on just simple crosses and a simple start and end to your thread. That's all I want to do today. So with this stand it's going to be a little bit difficult. I'm going to have to cut away and then zoom you back in because I have to either take it off the stand or turn the whole thing over. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish this flower. Now this cross stitch is the one that I showed you in the first tutorial, the Aura Lower licensed stamped cross stitch kit, and I've almost finished the flower at the top. So I thought it'd be nice to just do a couple of stitches with you to show you, and you can just sit and watch as I stitch. We'll chat about a couple of things, and yeah, that'll be this video. And then the next video will go into accessories, which is what I planned for the second video, but it's really important that I show you more of me stitching so you get it a bit better if you're a visual learner, because I know I am, and I taught myself how to cross stitch. So let's get straight into it. I'll show you how I thread my needle again, like I did in the first tutorial, just to give you a bit of a refresher, and how I start off my thread. So first step is to pick a symbol. I'm going to go with these kind of like triangles or arrows to start with, because they're the hardest ones for me to see out of the lines and these other symbols going along here. So what you do is you look at the symbol and you find it on your key, which will be on the side of your fabric, it should be, and it will give you the number of the thread that you need. And now I'm just going to zoom you back out. I'll try and do it slowly. I want you to be zoomed out far enough that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead and find that symbol, and then we'll come back and find the right number. So my key along the fabric is telling me that that symbol is number 30. So I will find number 30 on my floss, which is this orange colour. And we will take, remember if you watched the other one, what I did before, we will take one of these out. You don't have to take all of them out, just get one and pull. Now these will go like that, and you just pull them back down tight, and that saves you having to take all of the floss off. So put this out of the way. And if you remember, I said before that sometimes these cross stitch kits come, like the threads are really long. These ones are as well, these are really long. So I'm doing an 11 count, and what that means is I need 3 strands out of this thread. So I kept saying strand on everything on the first tutorial, but what we do is we tap it until they split like that. Apologies for my fingernails, I was making diamond painting scented putty and the blue has stained my skin, and my nails always get stained from everything I do. So that's 1, this is 2, and you're literally just pulling from the top. That's 2, and then we need 1 more. pull that. Right, so there's my 3 strands laying on top, and now I'm going to put this other 3, because in each thread there's always 6 strands, so this is enough for another time. So I will put that back on the floss organisers. Right, so we'll pick up all of our floss, our 3 strands, and make sure they're the same length. So at the minute I've got 2 that are shorter than 1, so I'll grab these 2 shorter ones and pull the other thread until they meet. Okay, and then I run my hand along the rest of them just to line it up, because you don't want any knots. Double check that these are all the same length, which they're not. They're a little bit off, like that. Then I get my needle, and I do lick my floss. You don't have to. You can buy thread. Is it needle? Is it thread? I can't remember what they're called, but they help you glide the thread through the needle. Needle threader, I believe they're called. And you want to make sure that all 3 go through. Okay. Now, when you pull this side that you've threaded through, you don't want them to be all the way down the bottom with 3 strands, because if you stitch, as I said in the last tutorial, if you stitch like that and they're both the same length, you will be stitching with 6 strands, not 3. Okay, so make sure that 1 is always shorter, but not ridiculously short that it's close to your needle and it's going to fall out, because your needle isn't stuck in the thread, so we haven't knotted the needle into the thread. Right, so now I'm going to turn it around, start my thread. I will record that bit for you just as a refresher, and then we will get to the stitching. I'll zoom you in when we stitch so you can see a bit more closer. This is actually really difficult to get on camera. Basically all I do when I start a thread is I run my needle under some of the other fabric. That's all I do, and I make sure that there's a little bit hanging out. Now, as I said, there is other ways that you can do this, but don't worry about it when you're first starting. This is the simplest way. Just run your needle under some thread, or run it through the underneath of the fabric like I showed you in the first one to start. When you're first starting out cross stitching, that's literally all you need to do. Don't worry about the state of your backs, just run it under the other threads. Okay, so with a stand like I've got here, you have the choice of using 2 hands, okay? So if you're going to use one hand to take the needle out and one hand to push the needle through, use your dominant hand underneath. So don't pull the thread out with your dominant hand, use it underneath, because you'll be able to aim for the holes that you need better than if you used, because I'm right-handed, so if on my right hand is underneath this stand right now, if I was to put my left hand under there, I wouldn't be able to find the holes as well. So let's see, if you're just stitching with a normal hoop, then that doesn't really apply. Right, so I found my hole, and remember that all stitches must face the same way. So my top stitch goes that way. They all go that way. So for the first stitch, I want to do the opposite way. So I'm going to pull that through, and it helps if you're on a stand to glide. Keep hold of the thread so it glides and sits flat. I'm trying to do this as slowly as I can so you can see. It is a little bit awkward actually on camera. Okay, so that top stitch went that way. So they all need to be the same. And I'm kind of working at an angle so I can keep the camera where it is and see what I'm doing at the same time. I think looking through the camera is a bit weird for me. I can't seem to get it. So it doesn't matter what end you come out of, as long as the top stitch is facing the same way. Okay. And hopefully this stand isn't moving too much. It does take a bit of practice coming up the right hole. I still do it wrong all the time, especially when I'm trying to record. It seems to not want to work, but I think the more I do it, the more I'll get used to it and find the right way that works for me, I guess. Now that one doesn't look very straight, but if I'm honest, I don't worry about my stitches being perfect. I'm stitching for me. Oh my god, stop shaking. Yeah, you shouldn't really worry about your stitches being perfect. Everyone makes mistakes in cross stitching, everybody. And I like to leave mine in, because then that means mine is different than everybody else's, because you know we all stitch the same pattern sometimes, but mine is slightly different because there's an accident or I've altered it and I've changed it because of that. Right, so that part is done of that symbol. So I'm now going to move over to this side. See if I can get this in view. And the first one is up here. Now when they're close together, like we were stitching over here and now we're stitching over here, you don't need to end your thread underneath and then come over here. You might as well, it's called cross country when you move from one side to the other of a cross stitch pattern. If I can zoom you in. Yeah, so the only time I would recommend you not doing cross country is if you're doing a sampler, because you can actually see your fabric running along the back. Not fabric, sorry. You can actually see your thread running through the fabric when you look at it in the light. So I wouldn't ever recommend anybody cross-country stitching on a sampler, but with something like this you could move from one side to the other without having to worry about ending your thread if you want to. It does use up more thread, definitely, but it's down to personal preference. You know, stitching isn't supposed to be done the same with everybody. You know, you find your own ways of doing stitching, and I am a self-taught stitcher, so I have never been taught to stitch. I got into stitching because I found some lady on YouTube one day when I was watching diamond painting videos. She is called Mary, I want to say it's Mary Rose's Corner. She's a absolutely lovely lady, Australian lady, and she stitched full coverage cross stitch pieces, and I fell in love. I really did. I binge watched a lot of her videos and then decided to do it myself. I messed up. I bought something that was way too big for me. It was a counted cross stitch. Didn't know what I was doing. Didn't know how to measure for the chart, for the pattern to go on the fabric. Can't see what I'm doing now. And it was a mess, an absolute mess. So then I went to a stamped cross stitch, and that was a lot more manageable for me. I learned how to do everything on my first stamped cross stitch. Yeah, and I just learnt myself. So I'm not an expert at cross stitch, but the way I'm showing you now is the easiest way to get started with cross stitch. Just do simple crosses, do simple starts and finishes. You don't need to do anything fancy. You don't have to worry about what your stitches look like. I will say the only thing you might need to keep an eye on is how tight you pull your stitches, and that's because you can actually warp your cross stitch if you pull them ridiculously tightly. so I would avoid, but then don't have them too loose at the same time, you know, like you kind of, because you can see here this one's a little bit looser, so try and avoid that if you can. I mean, I don't particularly worry about things like that. It's more so when they're ridiculously tight that I worry, because I can also tuck this thread in with my next stitch that's coming up there, if that makes sense. And that's just how I do it. None of my cross stitches are perfect, as I said, so I just do it because I enjoy stitching. And unless someone is pressing their nose right up against your cross stitch, they are not going to notice. They really won't. Yeah, this stand is not the best. I'm not gonna lie. It's really not the best. The instructions that came with it were terrible. Kept telling me to put, they labelled all the pieces wrong, so it kept telling me to put like part A into part B, but they labelled part E as the part A and things like that, and I was just like, right, okay, well I figured it out for myself anyway, but it's not good. I probably wouldn't recommend it if you're a newbie. I would just hold your hoop. As I said, I won't be using this unless I'm on video. So, come on, where is it? There it is. Now another thing to keep an eye on is the length of your other side of the thread. Okay, you don't want that getting too short and getting stitched in. So I've still got a fair amount of space here where I don't have to worry about that. But as you obviously stitch along and you know your thread gets shorter, just keep an eye on that, because if not, as I said before, you will be ending up stitching with 6 strands, and you don't want that. It will be too thick. So we'll finish these 2. I think that's the last. Oh no, there is a couple more. There's a little bit more after these 2. And also don't come back out of the hole that you just put in, because you will pull that strand out, okay? So I went in through that way, so I'm going to come up through the bottom here and go up that way instead of coming out here and trying to go through there, because your last stitch will fall out. Okay. I've actually done that quite a few times by accident. Forgot what hole I went through and then tried to start the next stitch on the same hole that I last used. So it looks like we've got a couple more here and then I am done with this colour. Now I think these ones are also the same symbol, but it's hard to see, and that's why I said I wanted to do these ones first, because it does get quite difficult after a while sometimes with certain symbols, not all of them, but certain ones that look similar to, say, these ones here. It can sometimes trick you. The next video that I want to do for these tutorials will be all about accessories. So you don't have to have loads of accessories when it comes to cross stitch, but it's nice to have options if you want to. They definitely, well, not all of them, but some of them definitely help your cross stitch experience, I would say. Some of them are obviously, sorry, I keep knocking the camera. Some of them are unnecessary, like you don't, I wouldn't say unnecessary, but you don't have to have them. I mean, literally all you need to get started on cross stitch is your fabric, your thread, and your pattern, if you didn't want to use a hoop. And then obviously that's probably the most standard accessory, would be a hoop. And then you could go on to change your needle size if you wished. But I'm going to talk about all of that type of stuff in the next one. There's lots of nice accessories that you can have, but are not needed. So we get these last, is it 3? Yep, about 3 left. And then I will end the video. And I hope this has helped. I'll show you how to end your thread as well after I do these. Come on. It's basically just exactly the same way as starting. So you just, how I do it anyway, is I just run my thread underneath the other thread that's already there, and if it's a new cross stitch pattern, then I would just run it under the fabric instead. Just got to make sure that you don't come through to the front. Right, so that is all that colour done. So now, okay, so we're finished with that colour. So now when it comes to ending my thread, what I do, where is the end? So the end is here. What I do is I can either run it underneath some of the other colours like that, or if I don't have any colours and it's a new, you know, a new cross stitch, I can literally just, she says, just run it underneath the fabric there. So I'm not going through the other side, but I am just running it under. It's like the weave of the fabric. But because I've got other thread here, I will literally just do that, and then that is ended, and then I can cut this off. So thank you very much for taking the time to watch this. I hope it was helpful and I went slow enough to show you how I do my stitches. It doesn't matter what way your end stitches go, as long as you stick to the same direction. So you could have yours end in that way, but mine always end that way on all of my cross stitch patterns. It just helps keeping everything the same direction, so when you switch from one project to another, if you do more than one project, then you don't get confused or anything like that. If there's any more questions on how to do the full crosses like I showed you today, please just leave a comment, let me know. If I went too fast or you couldn't see very well, let me know and I'll see what I can do for you. There was also something else that I wanted to bring up that I should have brought up while I was cross stitching actually. A lovely viewer of mine mentioned after watching the first video that she couldn't find any 11 count stamped cross stitch kits on Aura Lower anymore. They only do the 14 count. This one that I've got is an 11 count. No, it doesn't say up here. But this one is an 11 count, so I use 3 strands, but they only have 14 count at the minute, which is 2 strands, and the symbols are smaller on a 14 count than they are on an 11 count. So if you think you can't use anything smaller than these symbols, I wouldn't recommend a 14 count. The only thing I can recommend is probably going and buying a cheaper one, unfortunately. There is a lady I would recommend on YouTube called Lovecraft Forever. I'll link her channel, sorry, in the description below. She unboxes stamped cross stitch kits all the time. She uploads every single day, I believe. I've been watching her for quite a while now, and she's a lovely lady. But she unboxes quite a few cross stitches, and she will tell you if she doesn't think they're good quality. She has lots of coupon codes as well, actually, for all the companies that she works with, and she does actually stitch a fair amount of them and show you the end result. So if you're looking for an 11 count specifically, that would be my best suggestion, is to go and watch her, find a cross stitch pattern that you like that she shows, so you know exactly, because she'll show you the inside of the kit as well, so she'll show you the paper pattern, and then you can see if the quality is good enough for you and if you think you're going to be able to read it. Because as I said in the first video, the quality of these ones are far superior to the cheaper ones, But if they don't sell 11 count cross stitches anymore, that is a real shame, because it's easier for people that can't see very well to stitch on 11 count, which is really, really unfortunate. I am still looking for other places that do licensed cross stitch patterns in 11 count, and I have yet to find anywhere. If you do find anywhere, please let me know, and I will make sure I let other people know on the channel. But yeah, that's it for now. We're going to go through accessories and everything next time, and I hope this was useful.